Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. We didn't get a lot of news when it comes to the development for EVE Online over the last week, but we did have a mass test that CCP organized focusing on the Mac client and potentially, I think, a bug that crashes that Mac client when it's under heavy stress from some pretty intense scenes. So we had to do quite a bit of shooting at structures, did some tie-dye stuff, and then we had our typical PvP brawl at the end of the mass test. For me, not on a Mac client, everything went very smoothly. I had a pretty good time running through that test. Next up, I think the rest of the headlines is all about the war, of course, where the Imperium destroyed like the keep star that was the former headquarters, I think, of the attackers, and like a lot of value was destroyed, and probably way more value was put into asset safety. So that could really be a pretty big chunk of stuff that was just yeeted from the game potentially, or a lot of ISK if they want to get all of that out of that asset safety system somewhere in Losec, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty cool, of course, that is still happening. I'm kind of curious as to the economic numbers after the turnaround for destruction and how everything is going to develop from here. Hopefully also the rebuilding efforts from the Imperium can help the market find some higher prices, because quite a few of our resources, I think, are still pretty damn low. So let's take a quick look at the New Eden store here as well. If I'm not mistaken, CCP has a sale going. It does. There we go. So we've got a sale happening for some hazard control skin, Ruby Star, Sungrazer skins, Blade Racer, alright, Inner Zone Vanguard skins. Those are pretty unique, quite colorful, but if you're looking for some more black stuff, here is Farger Snowline Blade Racer skin. That's a pretty dark one, that's pretty cool, and it's actually quite a few sales. There's even Vampire's Hex skins that are nice and animated. Cerberus Vital Shift Ego skin is also a pretty cool animated one. Providence skin, it's a lot of them. I'll let you go through the sales on your own if you're interested in that, of course. And then for the services, we don't have anything special to report, so we get to move on to the market. Let's go for some plex and stuff, coming in at 245. Like that. Alright, let's get started. Here is the chart for plex. So a little bit of a pullback, and it looks like for now we're starting to move in a 2.6 to 2.7 million price band on average. Volumes are up since the tax changes that CCP introduced. They should last for 3 months, and it's basically reduced taxes in the NPC stations that made them competitive with the lowest possible taxes in non-NPC stations in player-owned structures. And I think also that those lower taxes basically mean that there's a bit of buffer for prices to go down while margins are still okay for the traders, and that's probably the effect that we are seeing here. But it's also pretty obvious that the market for plex is not willing to go well above 2.7 million ISK just yet. So it's almost 2.7 million for the sellers in Jita, almost 2.6 for the buyers, and then let's see the player owned trade hubs, and there's a couple of trades happening in here, but it's basically better to trade in Jita 4.4 now, especially when you have all the skills, than in the Tranquility Trading Tower or the Perimeter Trading Hub. Buyers, couple of buyers there as well, but it's really dominated once again now by the NPC stations. For the multiple pilot training certificates, we have same little bump from 1.3 billion, so this time looks like we're not willing to break through that on the low end. 1.35 billion for the sellers, 1.25 almost for the buyers. And again, couple of potential sales in the player-owned trade hubs, but most sales happening in Jita 4.4. Then we've got the skill extractors that should follow the price of plex. Ooh, but that's kind of interesting. Look at today's data point, just below 300 million. If that has any more legs, it could really put some more pressure on everything. Yeah, and look at that, sellers coming in at 299 million, just below 300 million, and 295 million for the buyers. That's a very narrow margin, but that pressure that the sellers are building below 300 million can quite often be enough to push the prices even lower. So be careful. This could also happen for Plex, although here we're clearly seeing that hesitation to go below 2.6 million. Skill extractors though did just break the 300 million mark, and then the real question is, can the skill extractor market pull the Plex market down, or is it usually more responsive to the Plex market? And so if Plex then surges back towards 2.7, we should also see a push back up towards 310 million. Difficult to say honestly, because there is a little bit of pressure I think from all of these tax changes on prices in general. Let's take a look then at the skill injectors that are doing the counter move here again. Very interesting. The increased volumes are right here, and we're actually going back towards 630 million ISKs. It's 620 and above for the sellers, and then above 600 million for the buyers as well of the large skill injectors. Now in this 1 year chart, this is still pretty cheap, but we're well away from the bottom at 570, and we're again in a price band of 600 to 630 million. But while Plex is on the downside or on the downslope, the large scale injectors are on the upslope for that band. The small scale injectors then basically a little bit less price action on this one, way flatter and slowly landing on 130 million ISK, 125 for most sellers, 118 for the buyers, and this is definitely a little bit different as well. We've got more action in the Tranquility Trading Tower, taking up about half the sell slots in the top part of the chart here. So slightly different dynamic again in the small scale injectors. We are seeing the increased volumes after the tax changes, so there is this incentive to do some trading now because of those lower taxes. That's definitely an interesting metric I think that CCP will keep an eye out for as well. Then we have the daily alpha injectors that are flat at 40 million. For me, this is not bad news at all. 40 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers, a very narrow margin. It's right on its average, maybe a little bit below average if we take this big bump here up to 47.5 million in December. Into full account, but overall this has been what to me the daily alpha injector looked like, a 40 million doable goal for any alpha clone, and something that they work towards and then grab those daily alpha injectors. So way more steady demand as well potentially than Plex or skill injectors or things like that, so that we're stabilizing at that 40 million price mark to me is an indication that there's still decent alpha clone activity out there. And then finally we've got the hypercores that are bouncing off from the 280,000 ISK mark. It's 275 for sellers, 75 jumps away, but in Jita itself it's 280,000 and the buyers coming in at 266, which is more hesitation honestly here. I'm reading this search, when was it? Yeah, halfway June or something like that, back above 280 and to 300,000 ISK as an inflation expectation, if I'm not mistaken. That happened right when CCP announced the new keys for the reserve banks, but since then I would say that just like with Plex, we've got that here as well. We've got the increase, but once we reach the 2.6 to 2.7 million price band, the market doesn't know, it's not sure. Are we looking at inflation? Are we looking at deflation? A lot will probably depend on the fourth quarter this year, where CCP has announced the end to the resource scarcity, and then the question can still be posed, of course, are we looking at more availability of the raw resources, so the production of stuff, or are we all looking at more ISK availability, like the capital anomalies and things like that? Or are we looking at a balance of both? And so until CCP comes out with actual news, I would say that the market is very likely to just hesitate, to not be sure if we should be betting on inflation or deflation at this point. That brings us to the mineral market coming in at 920. Like that. Let's take a look at these. So here is titanium. You can see we broke down below 4.5 ISK, and then we are making our way back up there. If you look at the sellers in Jita like that, we're back at 458 for the sellers, 425 for the buyers. So this is the pattern that makes a lot of sense in minerals to me personally. When prices go well above 4.5 ISK, there's more supply that comes in to try and take advantage of these higher prices, and then when that supply starts to crash the price down to a price below 4.5 ISK, there's a little bit of a slowdown in that, and so we can then recover back above 4.5. And it's that meandering move around 4.5 that does seem to be happening after the April changes, the industry changes, where a lot less titanium was needed for industry in general, just being cut down quite substantially. And so this could become our new normal average price for titanium. Those that were expecting that to still remain at 6 ISK, which was that price point before the industry changes, where above 6 ISK, yeah, that was great to sell, and a lot of players tried to do so, and below 6 ISK we would tend to hoard our titanium a little bit more. Now that's gone down to 4.5 ISK on all of these changes. One quick note, of course, I did make a video taking a look at the situation in Amar, and in Amar titanium is selling at 4 ISK, so 4 to 4.5. honestly, percentage wise, that's not that bad. That's an interesting price difference for this raw material between Amar and Jita, showing again, in my opinion, that titanium is definitely a unique item, the most bulky mineral as well out there, and so transport definitely plays a big part of the titanium market, of its equation. And so you can get a big difference in price because it just takes so much time to move a significant amount of titanium through like 40-50 jumps if you want to do it completely in high sec, that this price difference can exist even in such a low priced base material as titanium. Next up, we've got the pyrite chart that is, I would say here, slowly edging up, trying to get to 20 ISK on a couple of days. 19 and then 20 ISK very quickly for the sellers, 17.61 for the buyers. A little bit of a wait and see approach on that one, but that's kind of interesting to see this slight upwards pressure in the pyrite market. Not what you would expect for a high sec mineral, but I should probably make that note here again. Titanium was cut down in how much it was needed post-industry changes, so here this lower price is normal. Pyrite was not, and as a result a recovery towards 20 ISK, which we reached before the April spike, is definitely in the books and seems to be slowly materializing. That could potentially mean very good news for Mexalon as well, which I would say put that at 75 ISK average. Historically speaking, we have the bubble here, then we got the correction after the huge amount of Mexalon that was poured into industry before the changes. But yeah, maybe a slight upwards pressure away from 50 ISK can sometimes be seen there as well. Well, we're almost at 61 now for the sellers. I think that's up a little bit, and then 58 for the buyers. That's a pretty narrow margin, and to me what I like about this one is the volumes make sense. Sellers with more than 10 million units are really the exception here, and so the availability of Mexalon is not that great. In nullsec it's really not going to be a lot. If those industries in nullsec start to pick back up, they will need Mexalon, and I think a recovery to 75 is definitely doable at that point. And that's honestly a little bit my expectation. I do think that the Imperium is definitely going to build back up their entire infrastructure, and I mean they're the industries bees of EVE Online. I'm pretty sure that they will still be working on trying to secure the top spots in the large ships as well. So could be good news there for Mexalon. Then we've got Isogen next. Let's click on the right one, and Isogen broke back down. We're back below 60 ISK. We're not really willing to go back towards the 50s though from about 2 months ago. So a little bit of a breakdown, but nothing too special in the full range. It's now 58 for the sellers and 55 for the buyers. And the bad news, you could say, is that this is still quite a bit of titanium that is finding its way to the market that I don't think is actively mined. 50 million, 40 million, 60 million, another 30 million. Here several more of that 10-15 million round number. Does feel like someone is placing their bets and is trying to get rid of their Isogen, despite my read on the situation that once we get through most of these reserves and we get into an active supply demand situation, that we will see higher prices. But of course you can't really wait endlessly, and if you bought at the really low price points of like 25 5 ISK. For Isogen, you're still looking at doubling and more of your ISK, and so trying to get rid of that is of course very much possible. I still also hold to the idea, this is pure conjecture on my part, but I do think that this is a metric that CCP is also keeping an eye out for. How much more is from the old stocks is in the system. They will know that way better than we do, and from that perspective, Q4 give us another quarter to get through all of this Isogen. To me, that makes a lot of sense. This is like maybe 100 more million, maybe up to 200 more million units, and then we would get that market on regular supplies. I think that should be doable in a couple of months, especially if we can increase our activity a little bit after the summer slump. Then we've got the Noxium market that's I think in a healthier spot from that perspective. You actually have some price responses as well, depending on with I'm just going to give that comparison again with Isogen having a little bit of a bump, but so absorbed so quickly on that industry. This shows that everyone's still flush with Isogen, in my opinion, so that was also squashed so quickly by supplies, whereas Noxium, yeah, it basically doubled in price from the start of the year, and actually then went up to 2000 ISK at the height of the frenzy for minerals. And look at how long it lasted as well. Stayed above 1500 for over a month as well. So here we do have, this is what you would expect from a low sec mineral. At this point, I think that the most valuable Tick 1 mineral as well, and this one has more of a responsive chart to what's happening. We do see a little bit of a pullback at the tail end here, 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average, so we're back below 1200 ISK for the sellers, 1140 for the buyers. But this is again, it's rare to see a seller be able to bring more than 1 million units to the market in a single sell order, and that's in line with a low sec mineral and thus with a very expensive mineral as well. So this slight knockdown here could be the taxes. Honestly, if we look at the timing here, start of August, that's that patch, and again, trade coming back to Jita, and then the margins basically still being alright despite the pullback in price because of the lower taxes. So that's my read on that, and this could also be, yeah, that actually, now that I think about it, makes sense why we also see a pullback from early August in Isogen, because if you want to get rid of your Isogen and you still hold these old stocks, this is of course the time to do it, because you're paying the lowest possible taxes even here in Jita 4.4. Actually makes perfect sense that these stocks are finding their way to the market now, because you're getting more from that 58 ISK Isogen than just a month ago for 60 or 61 ISK right here with a lot of competition, probably because you were above 60 ISK. So that actually makes a lot of sense looking back at that Isogen chart as well. That's probably what's happening there. Then we've got for nullsec our Zydrine chart, where if I'm not mistaken in the MAR we're well above 1000 ISK, so the imports there are a bit more expensive, and then we have a little bit of a pullback. So we tried to go back to 1000 ISK for Zydrine, didn't quite get there. We're back down to 930 for the sellers and 903 ISK for the buyers, which again could entirely be the taxes that are at play. So once that's absorbed and then we go back into the regular dynamic, I would not be surprised that we will see prices go back up a little bit, and then we get Megasite that actually did a surprise jump from 6 to 700 ISK. Not sure what the catalyst of that was. I didn't see any real potential reasons. Managed to hold on to that for a week practically, but eventually breaking back down again. Probably the tax changes helping speed up that recovery, you could say, in price. 610 for the sellers, 570 for the buyers. Yeah, the tax jump here definitely putting a little bit of a pressure, or maybe a small inflection in the direction for the prices of a lot of these minerals. I would not be surprised if in the longer term that'll just be a slight bump down, but the trends should still, in my opinion, remain the same. And then we've got Morphite, that kind of confirms that as well. Morphite was trying to break out again from 100,000 disc on the upside. Tax change comes in and we're actually for the first time in almost a month potentially below 100,000 disc. Yeah, 99,000 for the sellers, 97,000 for the buyers. That again is because you're more competitive in the market with these lower taxes, and so those lower taxes potentially mean lower prices as well, as we are seeing here in the minerals. Very cool stuff. The pattern is pretty much the same everywhere except for TRIT. That's actually moving back up a little bit, so we will see how that evolves, of course. Next up, the PI market, coming in at 2010. And let's see what we spot here. Could have, yeah, same response. Yeah, maybe we'll have to see. But here for the broadcast nodes, we had a breakout again happening up until the first part of March, actually going well above 1.75 million, definitely above average. We're still at 1.8 and buyers are at 1.7 million, but you can see that these average prices took a little bit of a beating, probably again on those tax changes on that competition there. Still above 1.75 is a pretty good price, I think, for broadcast nodes, and probably a sign as well that there's still some capital construction happening out there creating that demand. And of course structures as well. The rebuilding of Delft, I believe it is, will not go without a serious injection of resources. Construction blocks went to a one-year low point or very close to that at 6k. We're bouncing up from that just a little bit, but the story is still the same. 6,800 for the seller, 6.2 for the buyers, and it's basically a lack of demand. Although here we're finally getting some decent numbers, so could this be the turnaround? We will see, but this is clearly still a very low price. Consumer electronics continuing the bad news. Data point today below 5,000 is normal price of this item 12,500 if I'm not mistaken. So this is a very bad price, and this is the lack of demand. 5,000 for the sellers, 4,000 for the buyers. There's 0 buyers in and around JITA for these consumer electronics, which is crashing the price down to crazy levels. This could be the lowest I have ever seen consumer electronics. Coolants tied to fuels were doing a little bit better, but we saw that in Amar as well. Something broke the camel's back, and we are pushing down quite severely, back below 7,000 disc. That's a 30% loss in a matter of a couple of weeks. It's 6.9 for the sellers, 4,100 for the buyers. Buyers just completely disappeared from this market. So last couple of months I could still sell coolants at what I found was a reasonable price, but now that's just not really worth it anymore. And for me, we also noticed that Amar is even worse, even lower in prices. So I'm really going to start to think about moving my PI operations in all likeliness to Gallente space, so that I've got easy access to JITA and access to the Dodixie Gallente trade hub. But this is potentially going to be a catalyst for me to decide on doing that. Then we've got the cryoprotectant solutions that are still slowly heading down, starting to hesitate at the tail end here, but staying well below 100,000 ISK, 99 for the sellers and 92,000 for the buyers. There's a little bit more demand. It is tied to implants after all, but this is still very, very low in price. Enriched uranium, same story, tied to fuels, was doing a little bit better, 10k, almost there. Sellers usually were very close to that price point, but now we lost another 25% on this as well. 7,900 for the sellers, maybe 20% loss then, 7.5 for the buyers. And yeah, the averages are actually closer to this, and here again, supply, demand, and this is just JITA, by the way, this is not any player-owned trade hubs around here. It's just skewed, the demand is not there. We get a massive drop-off this late summer, which could be summer tied to the summer, of course. I mean, if you're looking at something like this, and you can buy as close as possible to 4,000 disc, if there's a resurgence, you are of course potentially buying at the lowest demand we've ever seen, and it could be a good purchase. But we don't know again what CCP's resource strategy is going to be in Q4. If it means more availability of even PI as well, then this could not be the right move to make. It's difficult to say at the moment, which could be part of the reason why so much is basically hesitating, not really sure what to do. Integrity response drones, higher volumes and prices that are still doing well. Same story, advanced PI materials is doing better because it is needed in the building of Tech 1 larger ships. 1.8 million for the sellers, 1.6 million for the buyers, showing that stronger demand. Do we see a tax bump? Nope, just completely absorbed. We're actually still slowly heading up in price for integrity response drones despite the tax changes. Mechanical parts though tied to fuels, and I thought 7,000 disc was already pretty damn bad, 30% below its normal average price, but no, we can actually go towards a 1-year low point, 6,800 for the sellers, 5.8 for the buyers. Demand is just again completely gone. Nanites is staying very low as well, playing with that 4,500 disc from time to time. Demand gone, 4,000 for the buyers. So one seller even so desperate that he's willing to sell 1 disc above the buyers. Kind of crazy, just sell to the buyers. I think there's like a tax you don't have to pay in that case, just do an immediate. I think you're getting more ISK for that, but yeah, showing that it's just gone, except for that which has become a part of the regular industry stuff, which is advanced PI materials. And again, here we could be in a double storm as well with the rebuilding of Delft. There could be a higher need for structures, and these require these advanced PI materials as well. And so here we're back towards 1 million ISK for nano factories. Yeah, 940,000 for the sellers, 830 for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators, that could be the tax bump again. So not willing to cross the 20-day moving average, but definitely taking a bit of a beating after reaching 800,000. Sellers are still at 800, buyers at 772. So I do think this will be another example of the tax cut here, where the sellers are just, all right, I can get better margins at the lower or similar margins at the lower price. We're just going to do that, get rid of some of that organic mortar applicator stuff. But sellers are still at that 800k, so I would say that there's enough demand to quickly absorb that, and so we're in all likeliness heading slightly up again. Recursive computing modules, still one data point causing havoc on the chart, but back above 1 million. We get that knockdown again, but we're still bouncing back up from 1 million as well. Easily absorbed. 1.1 for the sellers, 900,000 for the buyers. Then we've got robotics, that is tied to fuels and 1-year low point. Yet again, demand's going to be abysmal on this one. 58,000 for the sellers, 43,000 for the buyers. This is all the buyers that there are. Sellers, you can browse for days there. Self-harmonizing power cores, you can see it here again, back up on the higher demand. 1.7 million for the sellers, 1.6 for the buyers. Sterile conduits, are we above 1 million for the sellers? I'd still call that, just above 1 million for the sellers. 1 million for the first buyer here as well. Look at that demand, it is pushing up. I'd say that's still pretty damn good. And then Yukomi superconductors had that surprise bounce that was very quickly absorbed, and now buyers are back down to 60k. Yeah, the pressure is on, the demand isn't there. I'm not sure exactly what happened here, maybe like an investment or something, but that's not gonna last very long. And with mainframes easily above 1.5. Again as well, 1.7 for the sellers, 1.5 for the buyers. So that's the story in PI. Anything small and easily produced just isn't there. The demand just isn't there. Prices are all really, really low. But the advanced PI material market is way healthier after the industry changes. Because you need that for, I think, like carriers, supers, all of that good stuff, and that demand is clearly holding those prices up, even easily absorbing the tax changes and things like that. So this could perhaps be an idea, right? Although not sure if CCP is going to do anything like that, but for instance, construction blocks, you could say that could be a part of maybe industrial ships or something like that to produce. If you want to support this market, I feel like what they have shown is that adding for instance, a PI material to like a ship production cycle does create that better demand for that item, and so that way you can influence prices. On the other hand, a big reason why this could potentially not happen is of course because CCP's entire philosophy around the resource crunch, and what happened was that they want to bring more value to actual activity, and PI is not the most active thing to do in EVE either, and so maybe they're actually pretty happy with these prices crashing down like that, because that means that it's a lot harder for you to for instance completely plex your account just doing PI, just creating PI characters, which, you know, that's for you to decide whether you think that that's a good idea or healthy for the game, or a strategy to sell more plex. That's up in the air, but for me that does make sense, that you want to have people that fly in space, do stuff, find stuff, create stuff, be more rewarded than those that set up planets and once every 24 hours click on a couple of buttons and then just you know, every couple of weeks take the stuff off of the planet. So I think that's a big reason why potentially we're not looking at that scenario where construction blocks, for instance, could become part of product cycles for ships or munitions or whatever. Let's move on to the advanced move materials at 3030. And whoops, see what we can spot there. First of all, carbides. So crystalline carbonite landing on the 150, that's still the same story. We have starting in April with the resource, with the industry changes, we had that big jump up in price to 225. We actually stayed there for a very long time, but eventually we have absorbed all of these changes. I think the turnover in the war and then people starting to go home is also going to increase supplies on all of these advanced move materials, and thus we are back just above 150, still a small premium compared to last year, but definitely in a doable range. 165 for the sellers, 160 for the first buyer. It's basically slightly above average, but nothing too special anymore. Then we've got titanium carbide for Caldari that basically completely normalized as well, went to a price a bit above 150. It's coming back up, back above 200, so you're paying a premium 220 now for the sellers, 204 for the buyers, but it's still the same, still within the same pattern where you can see that the tops are going down and down and down, and eventually we'll land right here in the same range that we had about a year ago. So that this one, again, you could see that as, all right, is something happening here? I don't think so. I think this is more of the supply cycle. Price go down, it dries up a little bit, and then eventually is forcing the price back up, but then new supply comes in, and you know, that new supply is easier and easier to get there, so they're willing to jump back in at 300, then at 250, now at 200. I'm expecting us to go back down, and so a slight premium to a year ago is still very much possible in titanium carbide by next week. Then we have the Minmatar one, which is Fernite carbide. That's basically still just a little bit above 150 as well. Same story, maybe a bit more premium because it was cheaper, but the spike has basically been absorbed. And then tungsten carbide for Amar is right back above 150 as well, in the same range. Everything does feel like it has normalized after a difficult period or an expensive period after the industry changes. Then for our metamaterials, these have weathered that storm very well overall. I think we were at that 12.5k, for instance, for photonic metamaterials for Gallente production throughout most of the year, and we are still just right there. 12,000 disc on the chart, nothing much to report. Then we've got the non-linears for Caldari, a bit more volatility here, but we are again landing right on the 20k and even going below that. Potentially 20,000 for the sellers, 18.7 for the buyers, but you can see that we are definitely moving in the same band we were a year ago, so not much has changed, which is kind of surprising. I mean, you do have probably, in my opinion, a speculative jump here on an announcement for industry, but if we could disregard that, we are basically in a very, very stable meta materials market here. Then we've got Plasmonic, same story, 20k, 15k to 20k most of the year. A couple of spikes again here in April, obviously with the industry changes, maybe a little bit of speculation on Tech2 making moves as well, but overall 15 to 20k for plasmonic metamaterials, easily seen as a very stable market here again. And then terahertz for Amar, very same story, 15 to 20k again, and we're right in the middle of that. For our other advanced movement materials, last week was not good, and it looks like this week is not good again. Just like with that small PI stuff, the demand just isn't there. Here's fermionic condensates, 1 year low point, data point at 50,000 disk. It's 51 for the sellers, 57,000 for the buyers. That's just super low. Ferrogel, you know, crawling out of the hole, but not being able to go above 30k by any substantial amount. 30,000 for the sellers, not 29,000 for the buyers, is still very, very cheap as well. Fullerite's continued pressure back below 750. We're stopping the bleeding, but it is again super low. Hypersynaptic fibers touching 9,000 disk. So I mean, this is just a story. You know, I don't see any reason why this would change, of course, and especially if CCP increases the availability of these types of resources as well. But nano transistors like landing on 4k, I mean, it's not a 1 year low point, but it's clearly very cheap. Phenolic composites, oh yeah, then phenolic composites and ceramic fibers had a bit of a run up with the industry changes here, managed to get like maybe a 30% increase in price from 1500 to 2k. We lost most of that, but we're still paying a slight premium here, as we are at around 1700. I'm imagining 1740 for the seller, 1700 for the buyers exactly. So phenolic composites has still that slight premium, which is going to be explained, if I'm not mistaken, that you need some phenolic composites as part of some of those Tech 1 industry cycles now in the more complex stuff, and so it has that slightly higher demand, which the others, I don't think you need more ferrogel or anything like that all of a sudden, and that becomes part of the problem. And then ceramic fibers actually had the same thing. Look at that bump here in March on the announcement, managed to keep that 500 price for quite a bit, but we are slowly breaking down and we are back to average price for ceramic fibers as well. So yeah, advanced movements normalizing for Tech 2 chip production. Everything else, unfortunately, is suffering the lack of demand, just like with PI, and has very low prices. Then we've got the Tech 2 chips coming in next. That's at 3640. Like that. I didn't do any trading last week, sorry about that, so we're gonna focus maybe on my holdings and my completed trades still, so that we can do a little bit of a comparison. Here is the Basilisk chart. Well, I'd say that starts to look like good news. The chart is heading towards 200 million ISK, and you can see my previous trade in the Basilisk, bought for 200, sold for 230, and yeah, keep in mind that's after taxes. We are now selling at 212 and buyers are below 200 million ISK. So you can see it on the chart, there is this pressure. We're actually touching this bottom again, so 1, 2, 3 times same bottom at around 200 million. You can buy below 200, and you saw that the trade has been made on that one before. That does start to look pretty interesting for a Basilisk trade there. Then the Cerberus, same thing. Coming back down to 200 million on the chart. Do I have a Cerberus trade in here? I don't have one left, but if I'm not mistaken, I actually managed to buy one for 185 before. Let's see where we're at. 206 for the sellers, 204 for the first buyer, 200.5 for the next buyer. So to me, Cerberus still a little bit early. I would personally hope that this downward spike has a little bit more momentum, and then I would look for buy prices below 200 million to be certain that it's a potential trade where we'll make money on this full 1 year chart, or compared to this full 1 year chart. Now I will mention this one thing though. We just saw it in the advanced movements. All those materials are normalizing, and that should mean cheaper ships as well. More easier supply, cheaper ships. There is no guarantee that, especially on our summertime here, lower activity, that will get a spike very quickly. So some of these trades here I did in a matter of days. I don't expect that to happen on purchases now, and so I would really be hunting for the very best possible purchases here. For the last half year, this looks like we're hitting a bottom, but if we take a look at the full 1 year chart, you can see that we could go even lower. Then we've got the Guardian showing a little bit of pressure as well. Now 180 previous bottom, not sure we'll play with that. 193 million for the sellers, 187 million for the buyers. Can I get a 190 to show up here? There it is. So 190, and here again, so after that breakout here, 190, 190, 190, and we are here again. Guardian trade before, 185 purchase, 200 million sell. We're very close to that. Again, I would understand hesitation. I'm not sure if I want to jump in just yet. Then we've got the Hound that, alright, finally also breaking down. That looks promising because those last half year bottoms were around 25 million and just below, and we finally broke that as well on the chart. 23 million for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. And yeah, previous trade was 25 million almost for the buy, 30 million for the sell. This does look like potentially a good place to try and buy a couple of Hounds. 21.5. Let's see if we can get something. Yeah, you're basically buying around this price point, except for the very best bottom of the year. You're buying below the entire chart. Starts to look interesting. With that same warning, production costs are probably down substantially at the moment. Ichthyosa, a quick look at the Triglavian cycle, still holding below 700 million, so not that much change. I'm gonna presume here, and I'm hearing a little bit of static somewhere, let's hope that it doesn't come true, but that CCP basically made it easier to do stuff in Triglavian space. That's potentially what caused this decrease in price, and now we look to be pretty stable. 690 for the sellers, 654 for the buyers. Still very expensive, of course, but away from the top. Then we get the Ishtar, increased volumes continuing to go down as well. 210 for the sellers, 200 million, and Ishtar trade 206 bought, 226 for the sell price. So potentially this again looks like we're playing with these bottoms from 6 months ago. You're buying well below 200 million. No, at 200 million. Yeah, same thing. Is this a little bit early? Potentially it is, but especially if you have like a 3-month horizon and CCP does re-increase the taxes, then you could be looking at good purchases. And the Manticore seeing some pressure as well, but yeah, that's not enough for me. 27 for the sellers, almost 26 million for the buyers. I would definitely need to see us play with 25 million on the chart before I decide to jump in on that one. Munin, why? I hope this doesn't come through too much on the video, but yeah, I'm hearing some a little bit like static. Let's see, Munin, 190 million for the sellers, 182 for the buyers. That does feel pretty low on this chart, but yeah, the volumes aren't great. Be careful here. Then we've got the Nemesis up above 25 million. That does make the Hound look very interesting, but yeah, that's another no, of course. 26 to 23 million. I should have kept some of my older trades as well, but what can you do? Olneros back down below 180. Yeah, here is a bottom, here is a bottom. Honestly, it's not enough. It's 161, above 160 for the buyers, 180 for the sellers. That already starts to look like a pretty healthy margin, but I'll be honest, if this keeps up, we can get rid of these 160s, and then you're buying below 160 on this chart. Let's see if we can get that to go, and then we are talking about the bottoms pretty much for the year. That's honestly what I would try to wait for. Then the Panther, alright, not sure what happened here, but that's a pretty big surge. To 1.5 billion for the sellers, 1.3 billion for the buyers. Feels like it's a little bit too steep and out of place to be a production cycle reference, which is what I actually have these Black Ops battleships for here. It's like a Big Tech 2 battleship, so if there are price responses to the materials, it should be here. But yeah, this is probably like a big purchase or something like that from Nullsec. Then the Purifier, yeah, alright, data point today, well below 25 million. One buyer at 22, get rid of that one, buy as close as possible to 20 million. And that makes a lot of sense to me looking at this chart. So we're getting there, we are getting there, but I think patience will be rewarded as well. Scimitar, still, again, I'd love to see play with the 180 a little bit more than here. We're probably at the 190, 195 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. Yeah, that's still, again, I mean, we are at this previous bottom, but I would love to see us break down to this one and then get close to the 180 on the buyers before I jump. Then the widow, pretty flat. Slight uptick at the end here, above 125 billion, yeah, 126 billion. I'm gonna say casualty, or like a wave created by the Panther purchase. You know, other black ops do respond to that in these small markets. And then the zealots stuck at 200, 188 for the buyers. Again, to me, a little bit too early. I'd love to see this crash down even lower. So, but we are starting to see that happen. Supply is still pretty damn high, and thus we. Oh, and I didn't make my confessor trade. God damn it! Now that I think about it, but yeah, for Take 2 ships, I think opportunities are starting to be created. What I'm personally most afraid of at this point is to jump in too soon and to be stuck with it for a long time, because I mean, it is still summertime, lower activity. This oversupply situation could last for a while, but there's definitely interesting price ranges starting to show up here. Let's move on to the Tech 3 market at 45.20. Like that. And yeah, here's the confessor. So I didn't sell last week. We are plateauing 46.5. Should have sold last week, but all right. 42 million for the buyers. We're still definitely in the same range, but I would say that we are stopping our ascent and we are finding our price supply wise. All right, 35, 12, 12 here, everything else in line. That is not too much, not too little. Should be okay to start moving sideways. Whoops, we were actually here. Confessor, there we go. Then we've got the Hecate, same thing, stabilizing at 50 million ISK. One seller coming in, undercutting a bit, but 47 almost for the buyers, 50 million for the sellers. And again, look at that, 15, 18, 20, nothing in the last 24 hours. We should easily be able to maintain this price range as well. Then we've got the Jackdaw, again, went back up substantially, well above 45 million, and quickly normalized at this range. 47 for the sellers, 43 for the buyers. A little bit of demand, but nothing completely out of line, so we should easily be able to stay in this range. And then finally we've got the Zwepel that actually sees a little bit of pressure back down below 45 million, 45.5 for the sellers. A little bit of lack of demand here, down to 40. And actually half a page of supply coming in for this vehicle as well. So I would say here, yeah, we have these higher prices. I should really get my confessor sold, take my profits on this one, but I don't see any reason to panic either. Supply is actually not very high at the moment, despite this nice price recovery, and we're started to move sideways. So I think the market's okay with where it is, and it would take another disruption to shake things up. Potentially, then this Zwepel at buying at 40 million could look pretty interesting compared to everything else, but if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I actually did a Zwepel trade 41 to 45 million pretty much, including taxes. It could be. So if you want to take a gamble in the destroyers now, then you're buying some Zwepels and you're gambling that from here we're actually going to see a disruption upwards, so a big purchase for the Confessor, the Jackdaw or the Hecate, which is entirely possible. PvP Nullsec loves these types of ships, and then of course the Zwepel could ride that wave again towards 50, 45, 50 million, and then your purchase close to 40 million makes a lot of sense. If there's a move you want to make in this destroyer market, it is that, because the supply isn't there. If it happens, I would say that even buying 20, 30 of any of the other ships here could be enough of a disruption to push the Zwepel into an interesting territory for a sell price from here. So it is potentially possible. Then we've got the cruisers. Here is the Legion, flat just below 200 million. Honestly, I don't expect too much to be spotted here. 230 million for the Loki, which is normal for a shield and armor tank. The Proteus is now normalizing, I would say, going back down towards 180, 175 in fact for the sellers, 153 for the buyers, going back down very quickly. Maybe a little bit of like hype on, all right, we can use the Proteus and lose it without losing skill points, but it will still be the the least popular one compared to like even the Legion. Yeah, you can get that. You cannot get all of the others as missile ships. That to me just already makes a big difference. And then the Tengu can get crazy shields. The Loki can get dual tanks if it wants to, and the Legion overall a nice brick as well that you can do with both missiles, lasers, and drones. So. The Proteus has that range disadvantage that I think makes it range plus armor disadvantage. I think makes it the least popular one. And then the Tengu actually went to a 1-year high point at 280 million and is recovering from that, but still at 216. So yeah, Loki most expensive, then the Tengu, then the Legion, and then the Proteus that is now losing some of its feathers. Entirely honestly predictable. If there's one that's going to break down first, it is the Proteus once again. So yeah, in the tech true ship market, looks like it's actually pretty healthy, but not the right place to be doing a lot of purchases in my opinion. And then we've got the extra product for the week, which is going to be Gallente faction ships. You know, trying to see if we can spot some nice trends. When last time we did the same thing for Caldari ones, looked pretty interesting. So let's get going at 50-15. Like that. So we'll start with, do we have Navy faction battle cruisers? Yes, we do, and that means we take the Brutix Navy issue. That's selling at the moment for around 230 million, 225, 230 for the sellers, 206 million for the buyers. Pretty big margin between sellers and buyers here, but definitely trading pretty expensively. And then we're gonna quickly take a look at Drake Navy issue. Yeah, that was very low. So we do see now, to my surprise honestly, a little bit of that faction warfare dynamic coming back into some of these markets. Gallente ships are very expensive, and we saw the last time that Caldari ships were pretty inexpensive. So then we'll take a look at the battleships, Navy battleship, and that would be like a Dominic's Navy issue. Yeah, going for 700 million ISK. That's definitely way more expensive than I remember it to be. 711 for the sellers, 660 for the buyers. Very expensive on the chart, close to 1-year high point. And the Megatron Navy issue trading above 600 million, definitely the high range of its price band here as well. Next up we've got the cruisers, I think, Navy faction. So that's the that's a it's Executor, that's the one I was looking for. Okay, interesting, and definitely what you would expect as well is that the first move would be in the smaller ships, and you can see here that the Executor Navy issue is actually coming back down a little bit from the high point of 80 million ISK. Is currently selling for 72 million, buyers coming in at 59 million. That's below this entire chart, so seeing a little bit of pressure already building in the Executor Navy issue. Let's see if it's confirmed in the other smaller ships. Here is the Vexor Navy issue. That is definitely still very expensive at the moment, but here, even at the tail end, 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average to the downside, and potentially starting to move back down from here. 83 million for the sellers, 77 million for the buyers. It is very expensive, but starting to see the first signs that maybe we are turning that ship around. Let's see, destroyers. Do we have faction destroyers? No, but frigates we do. And let's see what happens here for the, I think it's Federation Navy Comet. That one is still very expensive, definitely at a high point as well at 17.5 million, 17 million for the sellers, 15 million for the buyers. And then I think it's the Molus, that looks Gallente to me. Are we above 20 for the sellers? 20 million, yeah, 15 million for the buyers. The only thing that's kind of interesting is that the cruisers, let's also take a quick look then at some of the volumes. So 1020 a day, and if I go back to the Vexor Navy issue, daily trade is almost 100. So you could say that the Vexor Navy issues and the Ogre Navy issue, no, it was Executor, goddammit, me and names, Alright, but at least it's still some volumes are the first to respond here to a potential change in the winds there for faction warfare, and they have started to show some signs of moving down. But everything else for Gallente faction ships is super expensive, so if you want and if you have them available, then of course at the moment going for like a Dominic's Navy issue selling for 700 million ISK does seem like a pretty good deal. Megatron Navy issued at 600. Yeah, honestly, we'd go Dominic's at 7 then, I think. But even the smaller ones, right, the that fired Navy Comet right here, 17.5 million. 3 months ago it was for 10 million. That's a very nice increase in price. So if you have the ability, I would say Gallente faction ships are at a pretty good prices. You're making a lot of ISK for those at the moment. That's gonna be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.